Brilliant. Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, well, I'll make a start. As Lucy says, welcome everyone, and thank you for being here on a beautiful sunny afternoon. As I said just a minute ago, I hope this inspires you to get out into your gardens and look for pollinators. I've just seen a queen bumblebee in my garden, which is fantastic to know they're all starting off and everything's starting to wake up, which is really exciting. Okay, well, I'm Tanya St Pierre and Get Cumbria Buzzing Project Manager. I'm here this afternoon to talk to you about Get Your Garden Buzzing, which is a webinar that will lead you through the different things that we can do for pollinators in our gardens. And just to sort of say a bit about our project first and introduce our project. The project itself is quite an innovative and ambitious project. We started it back in 2018. It's a £1.7 million 3-year project that's funded by National Lottery Heritage Fund and Highways England and a range of other funders. But it's not just us, it's not just Cumbria Wildlife Trust. We have a range of partners, which includes BugLife, Highways England, Butterfly Conservation, National Trust, and a range of local authorities and other charities. Okay, so we all work together. Okay, the main aim of the project is to create and restore 115 hectares of pollinator-friendly habitat. And that's across community sites and road verges, and hopefully within people's gardens as well. So that's down to you lot. And also raise awareness and knowledge of pollinators by working with communities across our project area. We're also working with our local data centre in Carlisle to create an online pollinator atlas so that we can record species, so pollinator insect species across Cumbria. There's lots of species that are under-recorded, and it'd be great for people to get out and spot those if they can. And we're also working with volunteers and groups to run our wildflower nursery up in Carlisle. And here we have a range of local provenance native wildflower species that we grow to then take out and put in our community sites and sites across our project area. Okay, so for those of you who don't know the project, we have a very unusual project area. And it's a pale blue band that goes from Penrith to the west to Workington, and then up from Dissington all the way up to Carlisle in that blue band. And the reason why it's that shape is because it follows a BugLife bee line. So one of our partners, BugLife, way back in 2014-15, they mapped a whole series of ecological networks called beelines, which are about 3 kilometre wide bands, and they map these, and these are areas of best fit, and they connect habitat that exists, so things like national nature reserves, sites of special scientific interest, special areas of conservation. And the plan is to infill habitat along these areas. Okay, and that's what we're working to do. It also, our area includes key areas in Dissington and Workington, and the sites at Workington, Maryport and Whitehaven. And we have a range of about 28 different community sites here and about 80 hectares of community sites that are located in that area. We've also got a site up in Carlisle as well in the city centre. The old golf course at Swifts that we're working with Carlisle City Council to restore. We also have up there the wildflower nursery that I spoke about earlier. Now, along the A66 and the A595, that the black lines, we're working with Highways England to restore habitat on road verges. We've already restored 39 hectares, and we're working with Highways England to continue a management plan for habitat specifically for pollinators. Okay, so that's our project in a nutshell. Now on to the main focus of conversation this afternoon. Okay, so I'm here this afternoon to talk about our garden, and I thought I'll start off with this slide, which takes us back to about 100 years, I guess. This might be a bit of an idealised picture, which is painted here. by George Marks, but just to sort of say, you know, 100 years ago, this is potentially what our countryside looked like. And if you're a pollinator, I think you'd be quite happy with that. You've got a whole range of different habitats there, from long grass to scrub to trees. Okay, so for a nation of its size, Britain has historically been home to huge wealth of flora and fauna. So things like hedgerows, bountiful hedgerows, wetlands, woodland, and wildflower meadows. Okay, but fast forward 100 years, and intensive farming has caused a lot of habitat loss, and much of our wildlife has vanished at a startling rate. And although a third of the UK land lies in protected areas, much of our beloved wild countryside has been altered by agriculture and dissected by ever-expanding urbanisation and transport networks. Okay, and we've lost not just vast habitat areas for breeding for our pollinators and for feeding, but we've also, through, you know, I guess our countryside's being tidied up, if you like, we've also lost things like bramble patches, nettle beds, messy scrub, native weeds, deadwood, overgrown vegetation. And these have been systematically cleared from our countryside. Yes, we do have pockets of them, but not in the multitude that we used to have them. And these habitats, as messy and scruffy as they look, are essential for the survival of our wild pollinators. That, coupled with the increased use of pesticides and herbicides, has meant that our countryside is becoming increasingly hostile to wildlife, and the remaining natural habitats thrive purely as small isolated fragments. And that's where beelines come in, and that's where our gardens come in. But just to say, our pollinators are struggling. In my lifetime, more than half of our UK bee, butterfly and moth species have declined. In my father's lifetime, we've lost 90%, 7% of our flower-rich meadows. All the habitats, 50% of our hedgerows and 60% of our flowering plants are in decline. So our habitats are lost, and that's impacting on our pollinators. We can do a lot to help, and we can do that through our gardens. And how we tend our gardens has a far-reaching effect. We can create stepping stones through our urban areas. We can create different micro habitats within our gardens, and together all our gardens are larger than national nature reserves combined. So we can do a lot, and even a little pots on our windows and hanging baskets, we can make a difference to providing pollen-rich flowers and nectar-rich flowers for our pollinators. So whatever space you've got, you can help, and that's my message. Okay, now I talked about the importance of gardens and the importance of pollinators. Well, worldwide, they contribute enormously, but in the UK, they contribute 690 million to the UK economy. There's, besides the honeybee, we also have another 4,999 wild pollinator species. Okay, and they all together, they provide a fantastic pollinator service, not in the UK, but as I say, worldwide. And in our gardens, high numbers of pollinators are linked into better yields, so high yields, and better qualities of crop as well. And they also encourage plants to set as well, and obviously they encourage them to set seed too. Not all plants are pollinated by insects, but over 80% are, so it's an incredible amount, and most of them in our gardens are too. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the different types of pollinator, just to explain what they are and what their needs are. So starting off with the four main ones, really. So you've got the Diptera, which is our true flies. There are hoverflies, and also our true flies, our green bottles and things like that. Also, pollinators are butterflies and moths. So our Lepidoptera, our Calyptra, our beetles, and our Hymenoptera, which probably are our best pollinators, our best visitors to our garden that pollinate our plants. Okay, so in terms of our Diptera, There are a lot of them. There's about 7,000 in the UK. And the best ones for pollinating our plants are the flower flies or hoverflies. And these are the ones that look like wasps or bees, or some of them do, as they are great mimics, and that helps to protect them. They're also fantastic for pollinating our orchard crops. And not only do they pollinate our crops, but they're also great pest control as well. So they're really important pollinators, but brilliant to encourage to our gardens as well. So if you want them to help you in your gardens, the things that you need to plant are things like umbellifers, daisies, thistles, ivy. They're all really good plants for you to put in your garden that will help hoverflies and help true flies. And these are the species that year round you may see in your garden. You know, early times of the year, they'll be the ones in the cold weather pollinating things. And the most important thing they do for us, I do believe, is that they pollinate cocoa as well. So, and what does cocoa make? Cocoa makes chocolate. So really important pollinators. And I'll come on to their special needs, because some species need stagnant water, and that's something that we can provide in our gardens. Okay, butterflies and moths, the key thing about our butterflies and moths is the larval food plants. So these are the plants that support the caterpillars and young of butterflies and moths. So we have over 57 species of butterfly in the UK. We have 2 migrants, which include the painted lady and the clouded yellow, and they're the ones that are regularly recorded. But moths, we have an incredible 337 different types of moths. Some are night moths, so they're nocturnal, and others are day flying moths. And the things that we can do to attract moths are plant highly scented flowers, things like honeysuckles, evening primrose. They're really good plants that pull in the moths. And also to think about light pollution as well. They are affected by light pollution. So maybe think about turning your lights off at night and not leaving them on too long. In terms of our butterflies, well, both butterflies and moths aren't tied to a nest. Okay, so that means they can travel widely, and this is where they're important. So they reduce inbreeding by plants because they're able to travel so far and carry pollen far and wide. So that's a really good asset for us to have in terms of pollinators. So what we can do to help butterflies and moths is to think about their food plants. Okay, and by growing those in your garden, not only do you provide nectar and pollen, but you also help to support the next generation. And I'll come on to food plants. Okay, beetles. So you don't really think about beetles as pollinators, but they do a good job of pollination as well. A really good fun one is the swollen thigh beetles, as you can see, thick-legged flower beetle in the picture on the left-hand side. They're fascinating, really beautiful metallic green beetles that fly into our gardens. One thing that you can do, if you do take cut flowers into your house, a really good tip from Sarah Raven that I got was if you stick your cut flowers from your garden into a garage, into a bucket of water, put them, as I say, into your garage, maybe leave a window open, leave them there for half an hour, and all your pollen beetles will fly off. And then you can take your flowers back into the house without having any insects, hopefully, on your flowers. But a really important thing for beetles is that the majority of them actually live in wood and need wood to overwinter, and to some of them actually feed on dead wood as well as young. So that's having dead wood in your gardens is really beneficial. Solitary bees, they feed on solely nectar and pollen, just like bumblebees. Okay, they resemble honeybees, but one thing that's a real giveaway is their underbellies. And a lot of their underbellies are bright orange, and they're phenomenal in transporting pollen. So really good pollinators, but very poor at taking it back to the nest, because they have this hair or scopa that's on their underbellies. The pollen literally sticks to the belly as they transfer it from plant to plant. So brilliant for pollinating our plants in the garden. And because of that reason, they're one of the most effective pollinators, so 120 times more effective than a single honeybee. But importantly, where they nest is a really critical consideration in our gardens if you want to support them, because they'll nest in hollow stems, they'll nest in masonry, they'll even nest in our lawns as well. Some of them overwinter in those habitats, so again, be careful not to disturb them. And think about, you know, clearing up your garden when things start to warm up in the spring. Okay, and leaving standing or fallen dead wood is really good for them. There's loads of websites about building sites of bees. You can make mud banks, you can create bee banks, you can create bee hotels and bee homes. Lots of information, so look online and make yourself a bee hotel if you want to help support bees. Okay, wasps. Most people don't think of wasps as pollinators, but every year I welcome wasps to my garden because they do a fantastic job of pollinating my raspberries. And they pollinate both my summer, so my summer raspberries and also my autumn raspberries. But not only do they do that, they're incredible predators as well of a range of invertebrates, so not just aphids but caterpillars as well. So they're brilliant pest control, and they clear a lot of your pests from your garden. Sadly, they're in decline, and a lot of that is due to climate change and wetter, milder winters. So maybe have a little heart and look out for wasps. And if you're there in your garden, you've got a nest in your shed or anything like that, if it's not disturbing you, then I'd say let it be. If they don't get in your way, then you know, let them carry on. I think bumblebees are probably the most iconic sound of summer, and they're fantastic, and they do a really amazing job. And something, I don't know if you're aware, they have this special ability to do buzz pollination or sonication, and that's particularly good in terms of pollinating our tomato plants, our aubergine plants, and our blueberries. And what sonication is the ability for bumblebees to vibrate their wings at such a rapid rate that pollen simply explodes off the plant. And that helps these plants set better as well, and it helps you give bumper crops. So they're really good pollinators, and they're used commercially for tomatoes and in nurseries across the country, and they're actually imported far and wide around the world because of that purpose, and because they're so good at pollinating greenhouse crops. Some types of solitary bee do that as well. The other thing to know about bumblebees is that they have different lengths of tongue. So when you're growing plants or pollinators, think about different shapes of plants. So things like foxgloves are good for our long-tongued bumblebees, and then more open flowers like cosmos are good for your short-tongued bumblebees. At the bottom, you can see the length of a tongue of a bumblebee. That picture is a garden bumblebee. That's the length of its tongue. It's huge. And what happened there, it was springtime, and that poor bee was flailing around and didn't look very well. So I got out some sugar and water, mixed the two together, and just poured it by the bee, and that bee there is lapping up that sugary solution, and 10 minutes later it flew away. So there you go. So that's a tip for you for this spring. If you see any bumblebees that look a bit distressed, try that. And just make sure you use white sugar. Don't use honey, use white sugar, and a teaspoon of white sugar and a teaspoon of warm water mixed together, pour next to the bee. Failing that, just lift the bee and put it on a flowering plant. Heather's perfect. So where do they go in winter? They'll go to north-facing banks. So they'll just be emerging now. As I say, I saw my first bumblebee now. The queens will be emerging. They'll be looking for nest sites. First of all, they'll feed up. They'll look for protein-rich feed. Really good things for them would be dandelions. Really good other species would be things like goat willow, and they'll go to those because they're pollen-rich. Where they're looking to nest would be tussocky grass, hedgerows, bird boxes. Compost bins are really good. It depends on the type of bumblebee. We have 24 different species, and about 12 you may see in your garden. Okay, so the best thing you can do is plant a wide range of pollen nectar-rich cotton garden plants and native plants. Okay, so when looking to design a garden, or if you have a garden, wouldn't it be wonderful if you all had gardens like this? If you do, fantastic. If you just have a simple pot plant or just a small, backyard, you can still take little bits of this presentation and use them at home. Providing somewhere with water is good. And then providing, whether it's just a whole range of different baskets and tubs of different flowers is really good. But the most important thing is, if you're going to attract pollinators to your garden, is to go chemical free. So ditch the pesticides, ditch the herbicides. They all have adverse effects on pollinators. Quite simply, provide a range of native plants and single flower varieties, and see if you can get plants that start out really early in the year, so right through from early spring, so February all the way through to October, and that will mimic the life cycle of the majority of pollinators that we have. Include the caterpillar larvae plants and mow less. I'll be coming on to that. Create wild and undisturbed areas and plant in drifts. So when I mean drifts, is maybe block plants. So if you've got cosmos, do a whole load of that together, because that helps to increase efficiency for pollinators and stops wasted travel time in between. And that makes the whole collection of pollen and nectar far more efficient for the nest site. Okay, leave areas of dead wood that I've mentioned earlier, introduce water, and the most important thing that you can do is let wildlife overwinter in peace. So I know everyone's itching to get outdoors, and many of us might have already cleaned up our gardens already, but maybe think ahead to next year. If you can leave wild areas where you don't clear them up until the temperature is a constant 10 degrees C, and that's the time that our pollinators are emerging, that's the best thing that you can do. Just leave the whole garden or parts of the garden. If you feel that some look scruffy, leave those parts just to overwinter and don't touch them. So I'm going to go into more detail, and I'm going to probably go quite quickly to the next slides because they reiterate what I've just said. There's a lot of information here. This is to go on our web page as a webinar, so people can look back at this and see the information here. I said about large gardens, small gardens, what you can reduce down some of the suggestions here. So even 1 square metre of wildflower meadow in your garden will help support a vast range of pollinators. That's what I have in my garden. I have a very small garden, and that's what I've done. And it's incredible what you can grow in 1 square metre. What I'll take from this slide is about, see if you can just source UK grown seed and plants. Okay, try and grow from seed, that's more sustainable. Okay, and try and buy local as well, because those plants are adapted to our climate and they're more likely to survive. There's some really good advice on the RHS website about plant for pollinators, and there's 2 good lists, one for garden plants and one for wild plants as well. So depending on your aspect, whether it's sunny, shady, dry, boggy, it provides a long list of information for you and different plants for different places. Okay, here's some ideas for different species that you can plant throughout the year. Mixture of native and non-native. I'll go on because there's some more lists that I'll show you as well. But the Wildlife Trust's website and web page is really great. We've got 2 really good guides there about butterflies and how to track bumblebees. So go and look at those sites. Okay, I'm going to talk very quickly about trees and hedges. Okay, diversity is really good in a garden. So think up and think along. So trellises are fantastic, and what they do is they create micro habits. They've got a tree, a shrub, and then long grass and short grass. That provides habitat for a range of different species. Native and non-native are good. Things like Mahonia are great for winter because they're flowering when other things aren't, and they're non-native, so they're really good. So think about bridging the winter nectar gap with those sort of species. I can't praise hawthorn enough. It supports over 300 different species of insect, and that's a really good hedging plant. but think about when you're cutting it. I know we need to contain a lot of hedgerows in our garden, but if you could cut areas of it just once every other year, you'll let our pollinating insects, many of which overwinter in there, have a habitat. So be careful when you cut it, and also be mindful that when you cut it, if you cut it year on year, it may not flower because it needs the wood from the previous year's growth to flower on. So if you want your hedgerows to flower, which is more beneficial for pollinator insects, bear that in mind. Okay. And leaf litter is brilliant for our pollinators. That's what they overwinter in, a lot of them. So think about that as well. And I'll just say about Salix capria Kilmarnock as well. Right now, queen bumblebees will be searching for nectar and pollen, like I said, and their go-to plants beside dandelions are also things like goat willow or pussy willow, but you can get an ornamental variety called Kilmarnock as well, and they provide high protein pollen for a lot of bumblebee species, and they support a wide range of other insects as well, so really good. If you've got space for a vegetable patch, not only is it food for you, it's food for our pollinators as well. Runner beans are fantastic. They're always visited by long-tongued bumblebees in my garden, which is great. And companion planting with marigolds is really good for attracting hoverflies in, which also help predate your any aphids that might be in your greenhouses. So put the French marigolds into your greenhouse and in between your crops as well. They're brilliant. And one thing I've learned recently is that you can actually transfer caterpillars onto nasturtiums as well. So if you've got any cabbage white butterfly caterpillars, you can actually get them off your brassicas and onto there, and they'll feed on those instead and save your brassicas. Or you can have a sacrificial cabbage or kale that you can transfer them onto. And what I do as well is I have summer and autumn flowering raspberries, what I spoke about earlier, which a whole range of insects love. Okay, if you haven't got that much space, then think about hanging baskets and what you put in them. Some bedding plants are actually really quite good. I've noticed that quite a lot of hoverflies visit Bacopia, which you'll find in nearly all your garden centres locally, and trailing lobelia as well. Lobelia you can buy from seed. It's really easy to grow. Same with nasturtiums, excellent for long-tongued bumblebees. Things like poached eggplants, good for hoverflies, and your lavenders are good for butterflies as well. A really good wallflower is your Bowles mauve, and that comes out quite early, so a good plant to be getting in now. And one that I really like is your Mexican fleabane or iridium, and again you get these beautiful little hoverflies come and visit those. And of course you can put herbs in them as well, so basket containers are fantastic. I also put meadow cranesbill in mine, and I cut back that every so often, and it has new flushes throughout the season. Ponds of water, we all need a drink, and so do our pollinators. Often you see honeybees going to ponds and taking water. But other species, like I mentioned earlier, need decaying water for breeding. And you might think, that's horrible. I don't want a rot hole in my garden. But that's where a lot of hoverflies, well, 40 different types of hoverfly actually breed in stagnant water. And we've cleared away a lot of our deadwood where they'd have had hollow out areas, hollowed branches where water would have collected. We've cleared out ditches and things like that in our countryside. But we can quickly create these spaces in our garden by making things like hoverfly lagoons. And if you want to know how to make them, go to Buzz Club. It's got details about how to make those. But really simply, it's an old plastic bucket, put holes near the top so it doesn't overfill with water. If it dry, fill it full of leaves. Stick it somewhere shady, add some rainwater, keep it moist, and hoverflies will actually breed in these hoverfly lagoons, and they're great to have in your garden. Okay, now lawns. We don't need necessarily to have wildflower meadows in our gardens. It's fantastic if you can. Some of us can't, but by simply changing the way we mow can really help benefit pollinators. So by mowing maybe once a month, by adding species to your lawns, so different seed mix maybe, you can make flower-rich lawns, okay, which you can keep quite short. And this is a flower and lawn seed mix that we're trialing at our at Gosling Site Nursery. The picture on the right hand side is actually Kew Gardens, and that's what that's our aspiration. But what we want to add in amongst the sea of daisies is also things like clover. That's a really good drought resistant species, and self-heal is great for our bumblebees. Bird's foot trefoil can support up to 1,400 different insects, so really good to get into your gardens. So we want to mix it up. So you can cut lawns and have flowers too, but you can also adopt your no mow May and your let it bloom June, and that will help a lot of insects as well that like longer grass. Or you could go for a northern hay meadow in your garden as well. As I say, I've got 1 square metre. It doesn't quite look like that, but it's got oxeye daisies, it's got great burnet, and I've used species that are from Cumbria. And you can actually buy Cumbrian wildflower mixes online from Cumbria Wildflowers or Scotia Seeds. There's 2 websites there. Or you can simply buy different packets of seed off the internet and make up your own mixes, but the seeds there are the ones that would be in a northern upland hay meadow. So yellow apple is the important one. Black and common knapweed are really good for a whole range of pollinators. The wood cranesbill is quite a rare species, but really nice. It normally takes well in gardens. So a range of different species there mixed with grasses are really good for pollinators. Okay, so wild spaces, key thing about wild spaces is to think about letting your grass grow. If you've got a patch somewhere, somewhere you don't mind being a little bit messy. Tusky grass, like cocksfoot, can support up to 34 different butterflies. And that's quite amazing, isn't it, really? Butterflies and moths, should I say. And they'll use tusky grass to lay their eggs in as food plants and to overwinter in. So think about that habitat being there year round. Think about other habitats where leaf litter can accumulate and where they'll be undisturbed in your garden. The picture on the bottom left is where I've created a leaf retreat, and I've piled up my leaves, stuck it in some chicken wire with some canes, and I'm leaving all that to rot down, and that's great for beetles and possibly some species of solitary bee and hoverfly. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the wondrous world of weeds. And love them or hate them, nettles are incredible. They support over 40 different species of insect and are really important for some of our best loved butterflies. So our small tortoiseshell, peacock, red admiral, these are the sole food plants of these butterflies, so really important. And one thing that we can do to manage them in our gardens is put them in a pot and have them grown to contain them. And we can cut them back in June time or maybe late June when the first flush of caterpillars have been and gone. And that will make way for potentially a second brood of small tortoiseshell butterflies as well. So think about, you know, having nettles in your garden. Why not? They're really, you know, really fantastic, and they support some really beautiful butterflies. Now I'm going on about weeds for a minute, so do bear with me. Okay, ivy. It's lovely to see so much ivy in Cumbria. It's really brilliant. It grows far and wide. A key thing to think about for ivy is it's fantastic in late autumn. It provides food for so many different species of pollinator. and it also creates a fantastic habitat to overwinter in. So think about when you're going to cut it back. Maybe later on in the year, maybe, you know, sort of August time rather than springtime when everything is starting to emerge or might not have emerged yet. One thing to consider is the holly blue butterfly, the picture on the bottom right, beautiful butterfly, that actually lays its eggs, its second brood of eggs, on the back of the leaves of ivy. Those eggs overwinter. So that butterfly has eggs and they stay as eggs the whole of the winter and doesn't pupate until springtime. So if you chop it back, you'll be losing those beautiful butterflies. So just be aware of when you cut things back. I've already mentioned about dandelions. They really are the staple go-to plant, really important this time of year. And throughout the year as well. They're really handy. You know, they do grow in profusion, so if you can just spare maybe a few in your garden, but if you can make way for lots, fantastic and well done. And thistles as well, much maligned, but their roots and their stems are actually food plants to a lot of hoverflies. And of course, the flowers are really good for a whole range of different moths, bumblebees, again, another go-to staple. You don't necessarily have to plant invasive species in your garden. Our garden varieties are plume thistles, sea hollies are great, and cotton and giant cotton thistles are really good in our gardens as well. One that I plant a lot in my garden is melancholy thistle. It spreads spatially, so be aware of that, but it loves damp areas, so a really good one for a bog garden. And finally, to say about brambles as well, these are ever declining areas of bramble patches. I used to go and do a lot of blackberrying when I was a kid, and people just think they're really unsightly and messy, and yes they are, but they are a habitat in their own right as well. They support over 240 different species of insect. And 32 of them rely exclusively on the plant. So, you know, if you've got a large garden, you know, make way for a bramble bed if you can, or just simply have some brambles, or just be tolerant of them in the wider countryside, because they really are crucial. And obviously they're also important for our birds, and also small mammals as well. It's not just, you know, the pollen nectar rich provision that they give. So they support a whole range of butterflies and moths and other species of pollinator. Really, really good. Okay, so moving on to plants or pollinators. We had that list earlier, but I thought I'd just add mine as well, because these are things that I put in my garden. And just to highlight species that are really good for now, are red and white dead nettle. These can spread quite a lot in your garden, so put them in wild areas. Lungwort is particularly good now. Queens are feeding on my lungwort in my garden, as are on ryebees as well, which is flowering currant. Lady smock is really good for the orange tip butterfly. Be careful if you cut that though, because it's a food plant, so the orange tip will actually be laying its eggs on that. Moving to summer, honeywort is a really good plant for bumblebees, for long-term bumblebees. They really like that, as is foxglove. Oxeye daisies is great for hoverflies. Catmint is brilliant. For summer as well, think of nasturtiums for pot plants, your pot marigolds. Heathers are fantastic, and Viper's bugloss are just bee magnets, so definitely one to put in your garden if you can. Later on in the year, things that stand out to me are verbena, bonariensis, devil's bit scabious, teasel, mahonia for overwintering, and winter heathers. So a wide range of species of flower species there. I spoke about key larval food plants, and here's some of them. As I say, this webinar will be saved, so you can go back and have a look at these species. But key ones are bird's foot trefoil, hawthorn, goat willow, which I mentioned earlier, nettle, grasses, so not just cox, but other types of grass as well. Things like broom as well, and crabapple. So these are really important. So see if you can provide areas for different species to breed as well as feed in your gardens. Okay, and simply top thing, 5 things, sorry, to remember. Go native, mow less, be natural. So, you know, say ditch the pesticides, encourage some wildness. You know, let's change and rethink how we think about weeds. They are so important for our pollinators. You know, think about leaving that dandelion in the lawn or go further. Okay, and this is something that Chris Packham put on Facebook, and I thought it would be really good to share with you, and that says it all. So if you can think about cleaning out your garden after or when temperatures consistently reach 10 degrees C or 50 degrees Fahrenheit, that will be better for our wildlife. I've just been looking at a bee nest, a solitary bee nest that's got a viewing window in it, and in that solitary bee nest we've still got masonry bees, we've still got leafcutter bees, we've still got overwintering wasps that are actually in that bee hotel. So they're still hibernating now. So whatever you do, be mindful that you might be affecting things if you are starting to clear away. Okay, finally, just kick back, get your deck chair out, get your pina colada or whatever drink takes your fancy, and do nothing. Your wildlife, especially pollinators, will love you for it. So you know, don't go in there all guns blazing. Take time to relax, enjoy it. Oops, I do apologize. Okay, get back to our project now, just to say that we've got a whole range of different things that we would like to get out to people. We've got wildflower seed mixes, we've got spotter sheets, we will have a gardening guide coming out hopefully within a month's time. We've also got a wild pollinator guide as well, and we'll be getting these to outlets as soon as we can. It's great to see everything starting to open up, fingers crossed. But if you would like any information sending to you, then do email your address and we can see if we can get information to you. Okay. Other things that you can do for our project as well for pollinators is join some more of our events. If you want to learn more about gardening, we've got top 10 herbs of pollinators, and Helen's Herbs will be delivering a series of pollinator gardening webinars through April, May and June, so look out for those. We've got a host of other different webinars as well, and identification training and pollinator recording day. I think that might be all booked up, but Lucy can let us know about that. But quite a lot of events going on, so do join us for some more activities. Right, well, hopefully you've been inspired to go out and plant for pollinators in your garden, or you may already be doing so. If you are, we'd love you to add your garden to our map. So if you can go to our website, and on there, if you click on the links to Get Your Garden Buzzing and add your postcode to our map, you can stick your postcode on. We take your details, but that's only to make sure that we get details for this site. And then you'll have a bee hover over your garden, and that would be great. We've already had 300 people sign up, so it'd be great to make that to 500. So please do add your postcode to our map. Another thing you can do, I spoke earlier about lots of species being under-recorded. If you could, if you'd like to, add any sightings that you see to our webpage. If you click on our links to our webpage, this takes you to Cumbria Biodiversity Data Centre, and you can add any details there, or you can sign up to iNaturalist, and we have, this is a page on iNaturalist, we have an actual Get Cumbria Buzzing project page, and you can add your observations there, and it's really simple. All you do is you sign up to iNaturalist, and then you can go out, take your phone, take photos of what you see, and that the actual website, the project page, will help identify those species for you. You have observers and identifiers that sit on the panels who will identify the species that come in. It's really great way of getting records to data centres, and they go to not just regional but also national data centres as well. Okay, and finally, you can also donate to help pollinators to Cumbria Wildlife Trust. If you just go to our webpage, you can donate there. But what would be really great would be for you to provide feedback if you can, and by simply clicking on the link, the SurveyMonkey link, or the link that Lucy will send you out. You can just give us feedback, and all that feedback goes to an external provider who then helps us to ensure that our project is on track, and we're providing everyone with the right information they need to go out and learn about pollinators and take action for pollinators. So if you wouldn't mind filling in an evaluation form, that would be absolutely fantastic. Hopefully you've learned lots today. It's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Do apologise. And finally, this is a bit of a bibliography. So these are some of the books and the web pages that I refer to for my information. Kate Bradbury is a really excellent author. Her books have got a lot of information about pollinators and wildlife in general. How to Make a Wildlife Garden is, again, an excellent book by Chris Baines, and Dave Goulson is the leading bumblebee expert in the UK and nationally renowned. So his book I can't recommend enough, The Garden Jungle. So really good, and that's a really fantastic reading book as well. It's really enjoyable. So there's other books there to go at, and some other web pages as well. The Northumberland Moth Guide is really good. That's where I got my information about the larval food plants. So have a look at that. If you've got a plant in your garden and think, oh, what species would that support? Go to that website and it'll help tell you. That's specifically for moths. The Woodland Trust site is really good general information about what different trees support, what different wildlife. So some information there. If you want to contact us, there's my email address and there's Lucy's email address. And I think that whistle-stop tour is coming to an end. Yes, okay, so I think that's everything. So I'll stop sharing. Okay, and I'll come back to the screen. I do apologise, I think I rattled through that really quickly. Lots of information there. You might need to go away and digest some of it. Hopefully it's been helpful. Lucy, I'll ask, are there any questions that you may have from the audience?
Let's have a look. There aren't any at the moment, but maybe people are writing them as we're talking. So if anyone's got any questions, there's a little speech bubble right at the bottom of the video screen. And oh, we've got someone saying, wonderful presentation, so much to do in my garden now, thank you. Oh, yeah, it's brilliant, Tanya, thank you so much. Very inspirational, no matter what size your garden is.
That's it, yeah, we can all do something, even if it's doing nothing. But it's, yeah, and just a pot, a pot marigold on your on your back window ledge or something like that will be food for a hoverfly or a bumblebee or passing. Oh, I've got a question.
We've got a question. Do those bug hotels work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a lot of bug hotels. Both Lucy and I have met a gentleman called George Pilkington, who has designed some amazing bee, he doesn't call them hotels, he calls them bee homes. Okay, and if you clean them out, I think the key thing is making sure that you clean them out and replace them. If you're doing it for solitary bees, you need to be mindful that you might be attracting a lot of bees to one area, and that can bring pathogens and disease, and it can also bring parasitic insects as well. In the wild, a solitary bee would maybe find a nest at different places, so they wouldn't all necessarily congregate together. Some species do, but they'd have different places around where they would choose to nest. So I think they are getting better and they do work. George Pilkington's bee homes do work. We've used one of those this winter, and what we're going to do, we clean it out before we put it back up this spring. So just be mindful of that. But one thing that you can do is go out with a drill and create holes in wood. That does work as well. Okay.
Thanks, Tanya. And we've got another one asking, can you sow wildflowers outside now in Cumbria, or is it still too cold?
Good question. What I'd say is I started growing some in January just because we bought a meadow recently and I wanted to get yellow rattle down. Seedlings are starting to emerge, but ideally it's as the ground warms up. So now if you're growing spring growing meadow seeds or other seeds, it's best to sort of April, May time when the ground is starting to warm up, and they will get the maximum growth, the maximum sunlight then.
Thank you. Have we got any more questions? You must have covered everything, Tanya. Give it another minute for any more questions.
I think with this day outside, we'll see lots of pollinators. So I'm sure everyone will be itching to get into their gardens and do something.
Definitely.
But top tip as well is to just look and see when you're out in your garden, see what plants pollinators are attracted to. Obviously, there's a huge range of different plants. And interestingly, they do provide nectar at different times of the day, and some plants are better for nectar, some are better for pollen. Your roses, your single roses and your wild roses and your poppies are really good for pollen. And then some species are really good for nectar. So your Viper's bugloss that I talked about is really good for nectar, and that secretes nectar and it draws it up. And the pollinators will come and they'll deplete the nectar and then they'll put out more nectar again. So it will be drained of nectar, but then it recharge itself. So that's quite worth looking out for as well.
Oh, we've got one asking, what does tussocky grass look like, please? I'm never sure.
Okay. So tussocky grass basically is quite plump forming. So at the base it might have a bit of a sort of thatch and it grows tall. So cocksfoot can be quite tussocky at the bottom. Your finer grasses will just be like blades. So you'll have something like crested dog's tail will just be like a single floor, if you like, or single grass coming up, whereas cocksfoot will have different stalks coming from it. Someone's just posted there that there's some different, some they've had success with different bee hotels. There's also bee banks. There's lots of information on bug life actually, which is really good and worth reading. You can create your own bee bank, and just having mud in your garden is really good. But there are different, and they are getting better, the bee hotels. So have a look at a different range of things. Oh, great. Someone's going to move their nettles. Alison's going to move her nettles to a pot. And she wondered, did you see the rest of that question, Lucy?
Which one, sorry? The
nettles in a pot, and she's going to move them.
She wondered what to do with them. She's going to move the nettles to a pot because she wondered what to do with them.
Okay, right, great, yeah. We're just doing that at the churchyard near us, so we're having 2 large containers of nettles. So and we're just going to put up a little sign to educate people about nettles. So hoping to inspire people to make room for nettles elsewhere.
That's nice. That's really nice. I think that's everything in terms of questions, unless anyone else got a couple. Are there any other particular species of grass that are good?
Yes, there are. I'd go on the Northumberland moth site, and that gives you a whole range of different grasses. I'm trying to think which ones were good. Your I think even lowland perenni, which is your perennial ryegrass, is food plant for some butterflies. So butterflies such ringlets will use different grasses. I would say a mix of grasses, some tussocky, trying to think of the bents possibly as well. Some bumblebees will actually take pollen off some species of grass. So yeah, a small range of native species of grass are good. So yeah, so cocksfoot definitely, maybe some bents, some fescues, crested dog's tail, sweet vernal grass, so maybe a range of those.
Any more questions?
One final one and then we're done.
Yeah. One final one. That looks like the end of them, I think.
Okay, right. Well, I'll take this opportunity to thank everyone for listening. And hopefully, as I say, this talk has inspired you to go and do lots of things for our pollinators across Cumbria and far wide. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Goodbye.